Okay, so now here comes the fun part, soldering SMD or surface mount components to conductive thread. So first, let's take a look at our surface mount components once more. Here we have a resistor, and then here we have an LED. I've turned the LED over so you can see the two solder pads right here and right here. And this resistor also has these solder pads on the back as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to solder a little bit to these pads, and then we're going to eventually place it down in our circuit and then just heat up the component so the solder will go into our thread. The alternative way that you can do it is you can apply solder to your thread and then heat up your thread, and the component will melt with the solder. So we'll give both of those a try. We'll go ahead and start with our LED. So I'm going to take this down, put it right here. Hopefully y'all can see well. I'm going to take my soldering iron, I'm going to clean it, and then this can get a little tricky, but what I want to do is I want to eventually get a little bit of solder on the tip of my soldering iron while I hold this component steady, and then I'm going to apply it to that pad. Let's see if I can pick some up. All right, so once you pick up a little bit, you're going to add it to the pad like that. You can really just do this to one side. You actually don't need to do it to both. But you know what? Why not? Let's go ahead and do it to both. So I'm going to turn it over, grab a little bit more solder, and go ahead and apply that solder there. Notice I didn't spend a ton of time on that component. If you feel like you really have to wait to apply that solder, then it may indicate that your iron's not hot enough. Maybe you need to clean the tip of your soldering iron, all sorts of possible things. So I'll take my resistor, put it over there. Now I'm going to take my LED. Now this is a critical juncture. You always want to make sure that if you have a component that you're soldering that has orientation to it, that you're soldering it in the right way. So I'm going to take a quick peek at my LED. And it looks like my ground little arrow cutout is right there. So I know that this side is ground, which works fine because it doesn't necessarily matter where it is in our circuit. So now I'm going to pick up my component. I like to put my tweezers like halfway down the component. You don't want all the way because you don't want to solder on your tweezers. Oops. Okay. So now I'm going to hold my component over my conductive thread, where I want to solder it to on my conductive thread. And I'm going to put my soldering iron in between, like hold it on the pad and the conductive thread. I'm going to solder it, and then I'm going to let it sit for a moment to cool. I'm going to give it a little tug because I want to make sure that it sticks. This is looking pretty good. Turn it around. And then what I like to do when I solder the other side is put my tweezers on the top of the component to press down gently, apply a little bit of pressure so that when you apply your soldering iron, it'll solder in a uniform plane. And then of course give it a little pull. That feels pretty secure. You can also go back in if you like and apply a little bit more solder. We don't need to go overboard. Right? There we go. And that looks good. So now we can try the other technique. We can apply our solder to the thread first. So I'm just going to hold my solder over top of the thread. This is what's so great about this thread. And create two little 2 little balls of solder on top. Get my component, pick it up gently, place it over those 2 pads I just created, heat up the solder. Press my component down into it and pull, or wait for it to cool and then pull. So that side's good. Turn it around. Press down with my tweezers on the component and apply heat. Oops. I may not have gotten, so I may need to apply a little bit more solder there. There we go. And now we have a nice strong connection. I will say that working with these components, you're not going to necessarily use your soldering iron tip in the way that a lot of folks will tell you to. Namely, that you shouldn't put solder on the very tip of your iron, but for us, it's an important technique. So that's why it's helpful to have tip tinner or some other cleaner for your iron. Let's do a quick check to see how this circuit is working. If I remember correctly, that's ground. Perfect. So I've got 2 probes that are hooked up to a battery, 3-volt battery. We'll see. So either my battery is out or that circuit is not working. Let's test this just to make sure. Could also be holding them the wrong way. Aha. Okay. Just double check. So it looks like this battery is out. I'm going to exchange it for one that actually works, and then we can see the effects of our soldering job. If your circuits are ever not working, always make sure you have power. You would be surprised the number of times if that's not the case. Okay. So there we go. It was a battery issue. Tested it with an LED that I know works. It's always helpful to test with a component that you know works. So first we'll test our LED. So that's looking good. Strong connection there. And then if I move over here, it's a little hard to see in the video, but that LED is still on, just a little bit dimmer because of that resistor. Brighter, dimmer. Okay, and that's it.